Now on Radio Glamorgan, something special just for you.
Hello and welcome to the Sporting Roundup, the Radio Glamorgan weekly sports show produced by the final year sports journalism students at the University of South Wales. I'm your host this week, Haylen McCarthy, and I'm a 21-year-old from Cardiff. I'm joined by my fellow student, James Dodd. We have a great show lined up today, talking about all things sport from last week, as well as previewing the upcoming action from this weekend. We're also joined by Yasmin Wells, who will be talking about the restructure of the Women's Domestic Football League. Now we're kicking off the show with a classic. Here is Suspicious Minds by Elvis Presley.
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.
That was Suspicious Minds by the late great Elvis Presley. Now, throughout the show, we'll be testing your sporting knowledge. This week, we have 3 famous sporting commentaries that you need to identify, and what iconic moment in sport they're from. So make sure you're here for that. Now it's time to look at all things rugby with James Dodd.
I'm James, and I'm a third-year sports journalism student at USW from Barry. The third and final week of Welsh derbies saw the Ospreys and Cardiff Blues come out victorious. The Ospreys beat the Dragons 28-20 at the Rodney Parade thanks to tries from Matt Prothero, George North and Scott Otten. The consolation tries for the home side came from Jared Rosser and Jamie Roberts. In the other derby, the Cardiff Blues beat the Scarlets 29-20, the standout moment being Liam Williams' red card for his head clash with Shane Lewis-Hughes. The Blues' tries came from Willis Halaholo, Ray Lilo and Thomas Williams, with 10 Jared Evans playing a part in all 3. The Scarlets scored 2 of their own. British and Irish lion Jonathan Davis went over for the first, and Sione Kalamafoni went over for the second.
So James, how impressed were you with the Ospreys?
Yeah, very impressed, if I'm honest, Halen. They are becoming the real deal. You saw it in the Blues game and the Dragons game. They've really got some dominance, up front. Their maul and their scrum is becoming very strong, and that's helping them with, possession and territory, and ultimately getting the win. The 2 out of 3 in the derbies. George North has been back to his best, I think, in the last month or so. You got Ruben Morgan Williams, you got Ivan Phillips, young talent coming through. So they've got a mix of both youth and experience. And, let's not forget as well, in the last few days, they just signed, Welsh international Thomas Francis. So for them, it's looking up.
The Dragons have lost 3 straight games. What do they need to do to change their form?
Yeah, it's been kind of the same old story, if I'm honest. Dean Ryan, he is hopeful, and there are positives in the Dragons game at times, but it's just the same old story. It's been for years and years now. They're not getting the better, of their Welsh rivals. And Jamie Roberts, for me, has probably been the main signing over the last couple of weeks. He has really, added some experience in the back line, added some power as well. And he has been a class signing, went over again on the weekend. You saw the Jared Rosser try, they can play some rugby, but they just lack game management overall. You saw that especially in the Blues game in the last 10 minutes. They couldn't get in their own half. So there's a lot to work on, if I'm honest. And they'll be bitterly disappointed they haven't, they couldn't get at least one W. They probably should have beaten the Blues. The Scarlets, they were in it, and the Ospreys, they were in it at times. But it's just that last, kind of 10, 15 minutes that they're struggling with.
Speaking about the Blues, how happy will they be with their win on the weekend?
They'll be over the moon. I think they got the W against Dragons, but it was just an awful game. They didn't fire a shot at all against the Ospreys. Defending the Ospreys, their maul and Blues couldn't fire an attack at all. So I think the fact that their attack came off more or less perfectly on the weekend will really, really please Di Young when he's obviously joined the side this week, came in for John Mulvihill. So, Jared Evans, he created the break for Willis Halaholo. He created the break, which led to the Ray Lilo try, the crossfield kick for James Botham, which led to the Thomas Williams try. It was just an unbelievable performance by the 10. And 9 as well, Thomas Williams is on fire. There was a really good partnership there. So, yeah, all in all, apart from maybe a bit of lack of discipline at times, and the fact that they were against 14 men for, a lot of the game. But apart from that, that was an all-round perfect performance.
And the Scarlets must be disappointed after their weekend's result.
Yeah, I think, they were definitely the second best team. But 15, if they had 15 men on the field, they could have easily won. Liam Williams, he seemed to me like he was up for it, and then maybe he was up for it a bit too much. He was kind of getting in the Blues' faces a lot. And, ultimately then he had a bit of a, stupid kind of moment where he's just gone in. Shane Lewis-Hughes was on the floor and they've just clashed heads clearly. Shane Lewis-Hughes is out of the game. Not sure why he's going into contact with him, and it's clearly a red card. And he gave the ref a bit of bat chat, which you don't really like to see. The red card was the correct decision. But even without him, the Scarlets worked their way back into the game, and had they not kind of crumbled a bit in the last 10, 15 minutes and gave away a load of penalties, and they could, be sat here now with 3 out of 3 in the Welsh Derby. So I think discipline for the Scarlets is probably their main kind of improvement now going into the rest of the season.
And as a whole, how do you think the Welsh Derbies went over the last few weeks?
Yeah, it's, after the first 2 weekends, there was just nothing interesting to come out of one of the 4 games. They were so poor. The weather didn't help in a few cases, particularly the Dragons Blues game. The Rodney Parade pitch was awful. You're not going to get much attacking rugby out of that. So yeah, the first 4 there wasn't really much to shout about, and then the 2 on the weekend, Blues against the Ospreys, Blues against the Scarlets, and Ospreys against the Dragons was a real improvement, and it was really good to see. You saw both, all teams really score some nice attacking tries, and there was a bit more attacking intent than the first 2 weeks. In my opinion, and I think most will share it, there is still too much kicking at times. I think teams in their own half, in the middle of the pitch, are still a bit scared to attack because they want to kick, they want to get territory and force a mistake, which could then lead to, points, a lot easier. So I think the mindset does need to change, but that's not going to happen overnight. And if I'm honest, from a big Welsh rugby fan, it was just a relief to see, 2 fantastic matches. But all in all, it's a pretty mixed bag, and there were 6 Welsh derbies, and if I'm honest, 4 of them were pretty poor. There's aren't going to be any rugby, I don't think, with the cancellation of Europe. There's not going to be any rugby unless some Pro 14 games are rescheduled and moved forward. So we're not really sure on that front, but all in all, I think it was just a relief to have 2 class games on the weekend.
Thank you, James. It'll certainly be an exciting weekend. Now it's time for your first quiz question. Can you guess which team Steven Gerrard scored this screamer against and when it was?
Header for Gerrard! Oh, you beauty! What a head, son! What a head!
And while you think about that one, here is Relight My Fire by Take That and Lulu. That was Relight My Fire by Take That and Lulu. Now let's catch up with the world of Welsh football.
Cardiff lost to Nottingham Forest 1-0. How disappointed will that be for them?
Yeah, it's always disappointing to lose a game against a divisional rival in a cup match. Obviously, the FA Cup is great. Everybody enjoys an FA Cup run. The smaller teams are looking to get some of the big Premier League and Championship sides, and then everybody else is trying to get an easy draw. So it's not easy getting a team in your same division, but you'd still fancy Cardiff to win, especially when Forest are 20th in the Championship at the moment. But Nottingham Forest got a really early goal and kind of just sat on it. Cardiff struggled to put chances away. They created 15 attempts, but nothing really to show from that. It's been more of the same from Cardiff. 4 defeats in a row now. To be fair to them, injuries have plagued the side throughout this season and of more recently. Harry Wilson's been out constantly with slight niggles. Sean Morrison getting injured recently, and then with the January transfer window opening, Cardiff sent Filip Benkovic back to Leicester for him only to go back out on loan to Celtic with the worst possible timing, as Cardiff have not many fit centre-backs in their squad. Things have not been going great for Cardiff at the moment, but hopefully bringing some players in the January. I don't think there's much money going around the club at the moment, so if that's possible, probably need a few more fresh faces, but they need to turn things around quickly.
The opposite to Cardiff, Swansea are doing pretty well. The season's going to plan at the moment. They beat Stevenage on the weekend. What's your assessment of this season so far, Halen?
Swansea have been brilliant this season. Steve Cooper's got them playing great football, and they're, unlike Cardiff, defensively solid. They've only conceded 13 goals in 23 games in the league, and yeah, they had an easy game in the FA Cup playing a League Two Stevenage side. But like I said, playing one of those smaller sides, there's always the chance for an upset, and that's probably always on the players' minds. But they were professional and they saw out the game as they should. And I mean, it's going great at the moment. They're defensively sound. They're not conceding many goals, and they're scoring the right amount. It's good. Future's bright.
They got Barnsley on the weekend. What's your thought on that fixture?
Well, yeah, Barnsley are are a good side, especially this season. They've always been a side that when they're in the Championship, they play decent football, and they can always throw in a bit of a mix. You never know. It's not a sure result, even when they were battling relegation a few times. At home at the moment, Barnsley are playing great, 4 wins on the bounce, and they're pushing for the playoffs. Like I said, Swansea are defensively sound. Barnsley don't stand out in any category where it comes to attacking or defending, but they're playing good football. It's going to be two teams who are confident playing against each other, but I can see Swansea seeing it out mainly because of the excellent defense that they currently have.
And lastly, we'll look at Newport. They had a valiant effort against Premier League Brighton, just lost out on penalties. What were your thoughts on their exit to Brighton?
Well, it was a great game, as always it is with Newport in an FA Cup. There's a handful of times now where Newport have come up against Premier League and Championship opposition and have put up a great fleet at Rodney Parade. And they did it again, and it was great. The game very entertaining for the last 6 minutes of added time, but like it was typical of Newport. Brighton are a struggling Premier League team at the moment, and Newport like made them look like that, really. Like a Brighton team that didn't have much confidence, they'd be looking to like get some confidence out of this game, but Newport played their game well. And the lottery of the penalties is unlucky, really. A lot of penalties saved. Brighton goalkeeper Jason Steele doing brilliantly with 4 penalty saves. But yeah, it's a lottery at the end of the day. And Newport, as always, did themselves proud in the FA Cup.
They've been busy in the transfer window. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, with a few players leaving, Brandon Cooper leaving back to Swansea, they probably needed to bring a few players in, but they didn't bring any defensive players, and they've gone for an offensive signings. Jack Evans coming in from Swansea, a good little midfielder. More players in there that they'll know the Newport ideology. Obviously, not moving far from Newport to Swansea, there's a good link there with loan players, and I feel like he's a good little player. He knows how to play the ball, and he's also not bad at getting in a tackle. So I feel like he'll fit in nicely with the players that Newport already have in the team. Jake Scrimshaw on loan from Bournemouth, a good signing. He's a big, tall striker like what Newport like to play with Padraig Hammond and Tristan Abrams. So it's just more of the same with Newport with those signings, and especially when the form's dipped of late. Still second in the league, but no wins in 4 in the league. So maybe a couple of fresh new faces could mix things up and they could start winning again.
And final question, Salford on the weekend. Who's going to win that one?
Well, it's a big game in League Two with Newport in second, Salford in 5th. Like I said, Newport not in great form. If Salford win, they can go above Newport. They recently played as well in a 1-1 draw. I think it'll be a good game. Like I said, 2 teams that are gunning to get promoted this season. We've seen the meteoric rise that Salford have had through the Football League since the investors from Man United came in, and their form has been decent of late. They've got a decent home record this season, so I think it'll be a good game. But new signings in for Newport, you would hope that they can turn this form and keep their title push going. Now we have our second question of the show. In what game was the iconic try scored, and in what stadium?
John Dawes. Great dummy. Tom David, the halfway line. Brilliant by Quinnell. This is Gareth Edwards, a dramatic start! What a score!
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.
Staying with football, we caught up with Cardiff Bluebirds ladies player Yasmin Wells to speak about the restructure of the Women's Domestic League and how this will grow the women's game in Wales.
How will the restructure grow the game? Honestly, I think for women's football, I think it potentially could be a negative rather than a positive, because there is a lot of females in the game that enjoy playing as rather than a hobby, more or less so than a competitive sport. By the restructure of the game, it puts pressure on numerous women's football teams, including myself, the Bluebirds, to have to hit certain criteria. So have a stadium, to have a specific amount of money in the pot, to have certain qualifications within your organization, within your football organization, and within such a short time frame that they're requesting that from. I don't think it's going to be possible for a lot of women's sides. Therefore, less women's sides will be involved in the game. For my club, we don't have a stadium. We don't have this £10,000 or £5,000 in the bank. We don't have lots of positions where people have qualifications. So we have to outsource that, or we potentially have to join a males team to get the stadium. And therefore we potentially lose our rights as a club because we'll be under someone else's, so we'll have to follow other clubs' positions. So I think it could work maybe in the long run, but I think without support, without the investment, maybe from the Welsh government, I think it'll have more of a negative impact. So yeah, so I definitely believe the FA need to look at the lower clubs, because the bigger clubs like Swansea, Cardiff, they have the resources from the men's games as well. They already have the money, they have the stadiums. So essentially the restructure doesn't really impact them at all.
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.
Here is the third and final song of the show, and it's a good one. Here is Chasing Cars by Snow Patrol. And the final question of the show is, what fight does this renowned commentary come from? And in what year was the fight?
Oh, you can't believe it! And he's doing his shuffle. And I don't think Foreman's going to get up. He's trying to beat the count, and he's out! Oh my God, he's won the title back at 32!
Here's a reminder of the first question. Can you guess which team Steven Gerrard scored the screamer against and when it was?
Header, but Gerrard! Oh, you beauty! What a head, son! What a head!
And the answer is Olympiacos in 2004. Steven Gerrard fired one of the most memorable goals Anfield has ever seen to put the Reds through to the last 16 of the Champions League. Liverpool went on to lift the trophy later that year. Now here's a reminder of our second question. In what game was this iconic try scored, and in what stadium?
John Dawes. Great dummy. Tom David, the halfway line. Brilliant by Quinnell. This is Gareth Edwards. A dramatic start. What a score!
The answer is, of course, the Barbarians versus New Zealand at the Cardiff Arms Park in 1973. It was celebrated as one of the greatest rugby union matches ever played, as Gareth Edwards' try is considered one of the greatest tries of all time. I'm sure there's people hoping for 3 out of 3. Here is our final quiz question reminder. What fight does this renowned commentary come from, and what year was it in?
Oh, you can't believe it! And he's doing his shuffle. And I don't think Foreman's going to get up. He's trying to beat the count, and he's out! Oh my God, he's won the title back at 32!
And that was the iconic 1974 Rumble in the Jungle event, where the undefeated heavyweight champion George Foreman was challenged and defeated by the former champion Muhammad Ali. The fight was considered by some as the greatest sporting event of the 20th century. We hope you did well on the quiz, and if you didn't, we hope you still had fun. That is all from us today. We hope you enjoyed the Sporting Roundup on Radio Glamorgan. I've been your host, Hayden McCarthy. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Thank you, and goodbye.
You're listening to Radio Glamorgan.